This is Brett Rademacher, and I'm with Harold Smith. He writes the article on the website he-that-has-an-ear.com, and we discuss him weekly. We're in the middle of a series. He has a lot of series. This one's called the Temple series. This is Article 2, the Dividing Wall. And this article is one of those articles where it really brings to light how much of the doctrine of the Christian church or the belief of Christians in general has been deviated from the truth because of word meanings, how either incorrect translations or historical manipulation of ideology. And this is a great article for where you just go in and dissect, what something means, in this case, a concept, and how it's translated and what that means to us today. But one of the things we tell everybody every time, make sure you read the article, because there's links to Bible verses, there's links to word definitions, there's links to other articles in the website ecosphere that Harold's written up that help expound on or reference material outside as well, meaning other people's writings that just help bring in all these concepts and ideas together to make them more understandable. So make sure you read the article, because there's oftentimes we do not discuss everything in the article. This is designed as a video discussion to augment, supplement, but it's not the article. So with that, Harold, welcome to your show. Anyway, so we've got a new article that we're discussing today. The dividing wall. What's that?
Well, as the article points out, most people think that when Shaul, the Hebrew apostle, Rabbi Shaul, whose Roman name was also Paul, he had dual citizenship. He was a Roman citizen as well as a Hebrew citizen. Anyway, and so he writes a piece in Ephesians 2:11 through 16, and he makes a comment in there that the blood of Hamashiach has brought those of us who sometimes were far off, has brought us nigh. And it goes on to say that he is our peace, who has made both one and has broken down the dividing wall of partition. Now, at the time that he wrote this, there was an actual dividing wall of partition in the courtyard that divided what Judaism considered the unclean from the clean. It prevented Gentiles from coming into the inner court, which was considered more holy than the outer court. It was all a religion thing. But the problem we have with his pointing to the wall of partition in this verse is that he uses a different Greek word for that wall that is used and displayed on the actual wall in the temple. And so it brings to question, if he's speaking about the physical wall, why wouldn't he use the common Greek term that was emblazoned on that wall? And if Yahweh has torn down that wall, why is it still in existence at the time that these words were written? And it just brings a lot of confusion into the text. And it's mainly because we, in a culture 2,000 years from when these words were written approximately, are looking at them through the lens of our current culture. And we don't understand that looking at these words in translation and trying to understand what they were meaning at the time they were penned, as one noted Hebrew poet put it, it's like trying to kiss your bride through a veil. you just don't get the full impact of it. And whenever we read these words, we have to take into consideration the context of just the words themselves in the way they're presented to us, the context of how these words fit into the overall scheme of Scripture, and two, the context of who the people were that were receiving these words at the time that they were written.
You know, you mention this in some degree or another in almost every article because it is so important, right? And I think the biggest revelation that a lot of people have is that they need to do that. You know, that's the starting revelation, I think. You know, because of that, all these other things will start to come into place and be much more understandable. But just the fact that you have to look at it, just like you're saying, from that perspective, I think in and of itself is a revelation. Because people, as a general rule, aren't naturally prone to be thinking that way. And nobody's really instructed to them, oftentimes ever, about the importance of doing that, right? It's just everything's presented oftentimes in Christianity or in church in a, they try to make it relevant, right? So they're talking to them in a context that's just how they think they understand it for their time and space of existence, not at all in context of the thought process and ideas and culture and history that go into the reality of what was really being written and communicated.
At the beginning of this passage in verse 11, Shaul says, remember that you, being in time past, were Gentiles in the flesh who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands. That right there should give us a clue that there is something going on here in the background that he is referring to set up what he's fixing to say concerning this dividing wall of partition. And what was going on in the background at that time was that there was a serious controversy taking place in the social fabric of the Judaism of the time between two major houses or schools of thought of Judaism, Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. And these two schools of thought had tremendous influence with their decisions that they made concerning Scripture and concerning this religion of Judaism that affected the everyday lives of people living in Israel. It's a big thing. And the division that was taking place between these two schools of thought. Now, understand, both schools were under the sect of Judaism. In Orthodox Judaism, you have as many different sects and divisions as you do in Christianity. It doesn't take much for somebody to call himself a rabbi, and he only needs one disciple to make it work. But these were the two biggest schools at the time. And their division, the school of Shammai, the Rabbi Shammai, it's called Be'et Shammai, and Be'et in Hebrew means house of. The Rabbi Shammai didn't care much for Gentiles at all. In fact, he didn't believe that they needed to be incorporated into the kingdom of Yahweh at all. And these are what were known in Judaism, the Gentiles in Judaism were known as the uncircumcised, the uncircumcision. And those within Orthodox Judaism were called the circumcision, because circumcision has only become a common thing basically since the 20th century. One of the things that in Nazi Germany that the Nazis did to find out if you were Jewish or not would be they'd have you drop your drawers and they'd take a look and see if you'd been cut. And the thing about circumcision that has made such a division. Well, let me go on. The Rabbi Shammai did not think that Gentiles or the uncircumcised had any business in the kingdom, and if a Gentile, now we have to understand the definition of a Gentile from Orthodox Judaism mentality is any nation or any person, a person who comes from a nation that worships gods other than the Holy One of Israel. And so Shammai said that if a person from a Gentile nation was to come and attach himself to this, to Israel, to the kingdom of Israel, that he needed to be circumcised. He needed to follow all of the ordinances of Judaism, and he needed to be circumcised. Well, if you go back and read in the Tanakh, or what is called the Old Testament, circumcision was never a requirement of quote-unquote salvation. It was never a requirement of being a member to being part of the kingdom of Yahweh. In fact, in the discussion about who would be able to come and partake of Pesach or Passover, there is a statement in there that someone who is of the family that is not circumcised cannot come and partake of Pesach, which leads one to believe that there were people within the land of Israel who were not circumcised, and it was never a forced thing. Circumcision was and is stated as such in Genesis when Yahweh stood before Abraham. He didn't make a covenant with Abraham. He put Abraham to sleep, and he made a covenant with himself so that it could never be broken by men. And when Abraham awoke, he explained this covenant to him, and he told him that as a sign of this covenant, you were to go today, you were to go and to circumcise yourself and your sons and all of those in your household. And what caused Abraham's faith to be considered righteous to him was not the faith in this God that he was already accustomed to and worshiping, but the faith that Yahweh would fulfill the promise of his, the word of his promise that he had given to Abraham, that his seed, not plural seeds, but seed, would be and he was speaking of the Messiah, would come from his loins to restore the kingdom to the family of Yahweh, who was the prodigy of Abraham. So circumcision has never been more than a sign of this covenant. And but by the time it got to the first century BCE and then the first century CE, it had become a ordinance, what is known as a rabbinical ordinance that had been added to the words of Yahweh in the Talmud, which is the oral, what they call the oral Torah. Now, there were several sects of those within the religion of Judaism that did not adhere to this oral Torah, that they only considered what was in the words
Now, was there quite a bit of differentiation? And the oral Torah was definitely kind of like a very flexible, ongoing, changing thing. Was that the general?
Oh no, this was very legalistic.
Okay.
The harshest words that Yeshua ever had for anybody were directed toward these Pharisees, the keepers of the Talmud and the Mishnah, that what they did was they were taking the words of Yahweh and then they were twisting them just so very slightly to accommodate the and support the theology that they were.
But yeah, and that's what I was getting to. So there was definitely a variation that was fluid in not the sense that it wasn't legalistic, but fluid in that they molded it to have that subtle differentiation of what they were trying to change.
Much like Christianity is done today. I mean, it's the same spirit of religion any way you look at it.
But in order to do that, they had to take it oral, because if somebody was comparing, note for note, they're going to see some differentiation, right? That's why it went oral. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that really struck me when I went to Israel, in the beginning, I visited a couple of these yeshivas where they teach the young men the precepts of Judaism. And I was stunned when I went in there to discover they didn't teach Torah to these guys. What they taught were the commentaries of the rabbis. And they would...
Just like you were saying earlier, just like Christianity, right?
That's right. When you go to these schools of cemeteries in Christianity, seminaries.
That word, there was probably some truth to that word slip when you think about it.
They don't teach these words. They teach what the commentaries, the people who have written.
Basically, they're teaching opinions.
Exactly, and so this is what you get with Judaism, is that they're all researching this little this word that this rabbi used in this particular situation and how that influenced. I mean, it just is mind blowing. But they don't teach Torah. So, but we're kind of getting off the subject here. The controversy that was raging in Judaism at the time was this between this rabbi Shammai and another rabbi Hillel. Now, Shaul was a protege of Gamaliel, we're told in Scripture. Gamaliel, we're told in history, was the grandson of Hillel, the other school of thought. And Hillel was more liberal about this stuff. And he didn't consider circumcision to be a requirement to become part of Judaism, which is why it was easy for this Rabbi Shaul to lean in that direction and move in that direction to bring people into this new sect of Judaism called the Way. Now, when we understand this dynamic that's going on in the background in the history of these words that are being written, we can see how Shaul is setting up what he's fixing to say by addressing. He's addressing that very controversy in the first part of that passage. At that time, you were without Hamashiach. You were aliens from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without Elohim in the world. But now in Hamashiach, Yeshua, you who sometimes were far off are made nigh. You're brought near by the blood of Messiah. He is our peace, who has made both one and has broken down the dividing wall of partition. And the Greek word used for partition there is translated, the definition is hostility. There's this hostility going on in this realm of Judaism, and he has broken this down by abolishing the law of commandments. And now this is important, expressed in ordinances. Here he's referring to the Talmud and the Mishnah, that he might create in himself one new man in place of these two, so making peace that we might reconcile us both to Yahweh in one body through the cross, thereby killing the hostility or enmity that these two groups traditionally have toward another. And if you remember, in the council at Jerusalem, they had all kinds of people that had been brought into that council. And at the very first of that chapter 15, it says that there were also some of the Pharisees who believed Yeshua to be Hamashiach that were brought into this council. What is amazing to me is that they were listened to. They made the objection that people coming in need to be circumcised. And these brothers took that under serious consideration. They didn't naysay it or try to put them off. They considered the argument that they were bringing forward. And it was only after that they had come to the conclusion and they sat down to eat, and Peter was sitting down at the table with some of the uncircumcised, and they were breaking bread. See, in traditional orthodoxy, you have what is called table fellowship. And if you have a Gentile that's coming in and sitting down at this table, and he's, eating pork, and he's uncircumcised, and he's making prayers to some weird god or something, you're going to have friction. This is not going to be an acceptable scenario. And so what was going on was that they came to the conclusion that you didn't have to be circumcised in order to come and begin fellowship. And Peter was okay with that, and he was sitting with them. But as soon as some of the circumcised, some of the orthodoxy came into the room and sat down, Peter got up and he left. I mean, they wouldn't sit with the circumcised. He got up and he sat with, they wouldn't sit with the uncircumcised. Peter got up and sat with the circumcised. And that's why Paul got in his face. He corrected him publicly.
Oh, called him on the carpet.
He called him on the carpet. He corrected him severely because he was being hypocritical.
Right.
And this is all why this is going on here. And this article, for all intents and purposes, is showing, in going back to the Hebrew language and the Greek language, showing how these words mean things. And what Paul is talking about in this article in Ephesians has nothing to do with that physical wall, except that he's addressing the hostility that's created by it. And he's trying to show that this one new man is not some spiritual wispy, we got a new creation going on. He's talking about this one new man that doesn't have this division anymore. Because if Yahweh was sent to fulfill the covenant, what covenant is it speaking of?
Yahweh or Yeshua?
Yeshua. What did I say? Yahweh. Okay. If Yeshua was sent to fulfill the covenant, which he says in Matthew 5:17 very plainly, he says, I didn't come to abolish Torah. I came to fulfill it. And if he came to fulfill Torah, to fulfill the covenant that's contained in Torah, what do you think he's talking about? He's talking about this covenant that Yahweh made before Abraham with himself, that out of the loins of Abraham would come this seed that would restore the kingdom of Yahweh to his family. And if that covenant has been fulfilled, and circumcision is a sign of the covenant, hasn't that sign then been fulfilled as well? So do we need to be circumcised today to fulfill something that has been completed? And when Yeshua said it's finished, is it finished or not? Now that doesn't mean that we become ignorant of what all of that means. And we continue to walk in that fulfillment ourselves, because we have now become his body.
Let's talk about this, physical wall versus this other fence wall that's intended to really be taken down. In the article, for example, you know what? You had this interesting quote that I thought was rather fascinating, but you're getting to say there's an acknowledged rabbinical injunction regarding a fence around the Torah as an avat. They said three things: be deliberate in judgment, raise up many disciples, and make a fence around the law. What is he saying there? Make a fence around the law, keeping people from it, or that fence is around them to, that law is around to protect them? What exactly is he saying there? And you have another one that says, Rabbi Akabai said, jesting and levity habituate a man to lewdness. The tradition is offense to the law. Again, tradition, fence to the law. Ties are offense to riches. Vows are offense to abstinence. Offense to wisdom is silence. But this fence around the law concept.
It is, what they're basically saying is the ordinances of tradition that they have come up with are designed to be a protection around Torah.
Okay, so but I want to get clear on what their thinking is about. When they say protection, are they really saying they're keepers of how to translate it, kind of like the Catholic priests used to be, where we do Latin Mass, you come to when you say what are they actually protecting? Their agenda, or protecting the accurate understanding of Torah?
All of these ordinances were started altruistically. I mean, they were put in place because the rabbis felt like that their position was to protect the Torah.
Exactly. So, but we're saying is they're looking at Torah, and then they're taking their understanding of it, and they start putting in these traditions or ordinances because they feel like they are protecting the meaning of Torah behind that, which is a pretty common practice that man does habitually within the religious structure, right? That's pretty much it. You've got a religion that has decided how they're protecting, Torah or the Bible. Would that be?
The rabbis were keenly aware that it was the family of Israel,
okay,
collective group, that were responsible for being this Hebrew race was granted by Yahweh to be the keepers of Torah, and they felt like that it was their duty. I mean, and this comes down through millennia of tradition being handed down, starting in the wilderness, where the 70, this council, this committee of 70 were enacted to designate, particular things to help keep order in all of those people out there. And it got exacerbated and passed down from generation to generation until we wind up in this place where these rabbis feel like that they are they're the keepers of Torah, and so they have to put this fence around to protect it, because they understood that everyone in this society, how they approach Torah, if they were to break Torah, that it allows darkness into this place of light. And
so what you're saying is the motive was right in general, and then what it was is you'd have people that were looking to elders in the community, so to speak, that were more learned in the nuances of trying to understand it, and they were trying to, here's how we apply it to keep light in, right?
Right, and it was. But over the generations, it just became this vehicle of legalization. And anytime you put legality into a situation, you're going to be, you're not counting on the individual discretion, on the discretion of an individual to keep what he should keep. You are forcing him to keep it.
And we can see that now. I mean, this is a timely situation with the coronavirus, and we can see certain responses from more libertarian governors in the United States where they're saying, hey, we're trusting the people to do the right thing. We're giving them the information, to a more draconian approach where, stay in your house, don't come out, don't go to church. And so there's two different perspectives of looking at this that are polar opposite on how we look at people's individual ability or rights to handle a situation based on the information that they have. And I think what really stands out is, this is not just within, the Israelite community. This is the natural state of all religions, governments, is there's this progression. I mean, if you look at when you were younger, obviously that was a long time ago versus me when I was younger, which was not quite as long time ago. But if you look at how the United States was run and the laws that we had in place back then, right, to the amount of laws we have now, based on the interpretation of what was, it's quite oppressive. And I imagine that's what we're talking about here. There's this layering on of traditions and ordinances and laws that over time become quite burdensome because they're continually packing them on.
Exactly. And again, the harshest words that Yeshua ever had for anybody was toward these Pharisees, rabbinical Pharisees, who were the, quote, keepers of the Torah and who made the decisions about what was to be practiced and not. Even today in Israel, even though 70% of that country they don't believe in anything.
Is that crazy? I've heard that before. Maybe it was you, maybe it was somebody else, but I knew that the atheistic, percentage was abnormally high in Israel. And I remember when I first heard that, I was like, what? I was really astounded at that high percentage.
Even today, even though the majority of those people don't believe in anything, you still have members of the Orthodox sect. The Orthodoxy will send people out throughout the marketplace into the shops, chiding the owners. It's time, an hour before sundown on Shabbat, you need to close your store.
So they kind of run it like a little police force.
Well, and then you have in Israel they're called the Haredim, the Orthodoxy, and they have staked out a pretty good swath in the political arena, and so they need to be considered by anybody who wants. They have a parliament form of government over there, so they have to be considered by anybody who wants to become prime minister and put together a coalition to govern. And the Haredim right now, they are in charge of the interior ministry, which are the ones who consider who can stay in the land and who can't. And I mean, it just permeates throughout the entire structure of that country.
Yeah. Well, we've had several friends that, had Jewish backgrounds and became citizens, had dual citizenship, and with a Christian belief system. And they were very, very, very aware of making sure they were never in a compromised situation of being accused of proselytizing. Because especially before they got their citizenship, but it's a concern because they get kicked out.
Oh, that's on the more lenient end. If they really want to get you, they can put you in jail for a while.
Wow.
Yeah,
and a lot of people would not even consider that kind of thing going on over there in Israel.
It is very pervasive, and because of just a whole lot of different things that have happened over there. The Haredim being put in place, plus all of the animosity and hatred directed toward that country, and the fact that, you know, people are trying to wipe them off the face of the earth. They have a very defensive nature concerning a whole lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it was to these people that Yeshua, he gave them no quarter, and he told them they were snakes, vipers, that not only did they shut up the kingdom from themselves, but they also shut it up from all of those that were following their words. So whenever we put on a veil of tradition over our faces, we shut off that light of truth that is being presented to us.
I would like to read a section here towards the end of the article. You know, maybe we could talk about this little for a bit. It says, finally, it was aspects of the oral Torah, not the written Torah, which laid the foundation for a strict separation between ethnic and non-ethnic Hebrews. So basically, the oral Torah starts superseding based on interpretation. And it says the Ephesian text before us helps define the dividing wall with the phrase, the law of commandments in ordinances, rather than all the prior usages in the Messianic writings of the law. To denote those rabbinical ordinances, which had been in fact the obstacle of separation, the fence of dogma found at the end of this phrase. Messianic believers should be encouraged to accept the mitzvah of the Torah and live in a Torah lifestyle. But the scriptures command us to do this together as a community of Hebrews and non-Hebrews. To suggest that Hebrews have an obligation to Torah, which Gentiles do not, is to suggest something foreign to the thrust of the prophets and the apostles.
And that was a wrong use of the word Gentiles there. It should have been non-ethnic Hebrews.
Okay, all right.
Because there is no such thing as a Gentile believer. You either believe in the Yahweh of Israel or you do not.
Uh-huh.
And a Gentile is someone who believes in God's other than the Holy One of Israel. So you can't be a Gentile believer. It's oxymoronic.
Right. Okay, so now I want to go into this sentence that I highlighted because I felt like it was a good, it kind of caught me off guard the way you threw it in there. You say, we dare not take that which Yahweh has given to all his people and relegate it to a select group on the basis of the non-biblical teachings of unique callings. Okay, so here we go. This sentence right here. But this means that we'll have to die to ourselves at times as we bear with those who not only disagree with us, but are even at times antagonistic towards us. There's nothing more difficult than dying daily toward another of the community, yet this is the life with which we were called. This very issue is a hotly contested issue in the first century Messianic community. The influencers that Schultz dealt with in Galatians and 2 Corinthians, among others of the epistles, have been often misrepresented. There's very little evidence, if any at all, that salvation by work was a major tenet of the first century Judaism. The primary issue which raged among the Messianic communities of Shaul's day was whether or not Yahweh intended to bless the Gentiles as a separate community or as part of the Hebraic community. It is to this issue Ephesians 2:14 to 16, as well as many other texts, speaks. A study of the Greek word dogma in both the LXX and Messianic writings confirms that the term was used of man-made ordinances and not of the Yahweh given Torah of Sinai, in spite of Strong's reference. So there was a lot of good stuff there. If you missed something, go ahead and read the article. But what I want to get back to is this comment of we have to die to ourselves at times as we bear with those who not only disagree with us, but we are often at times antagonistic towards us. So who are you talking about? Are you talking about the world? Are you talking about Christians? Are you talking about followers of the way that are having to walk out something that is decidedly different from Judaism and decidedly different from Christianity? Is that what you're talking about here?
Christians have no place in this argument, in this discussion. I'm just going to lay it out there. Christians are as foreign to this discussion as are Hindus, Buddhists, Islamists, any of the others.
Why is that?
Because they don't worship the Hebrew God of Israel.
Now that's a strong statement, but when you start getting into it, what you're saying makes absolute total sense. It's like when people say Allah is the same God of Christianity or Judaism, right? It's just like completely foreign, and there's absolutely no way it's the same God.
The humanistic approach to religion of the world wants us to believe that there's only one God, and he's just called by different names. That's not the way Scripture presents it.
And having that belief system is all encompassing, because it can be, people can make up, oh well, it's Mother Nature, it's neutral, it's the force, it's the big guy in the sky, right? So it allows you to shape that into all kinds of different manifestations of your own interpretation, put a name on it that you're comfortable with. It could be as vanilla as, like in Star Wars, the Force, right? So that idea that you can pretty much pick whatever God that you want and color him in with your particular colors is the general world concept of God, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so what we're encouraged to do is, in the same way that council at Jerusalem, it says that there were Pharisees that came and sat down and they presented this argument of circumcision. And now these were people who were followers of the way, but they had not completely abandoned the rabbinic ordinances of the orthodoxy. And so they were bringing this controversy, this division in with them. And the way that they were approached, the way that they were dealt with, was not to label them, or to say, well, we have a unique calling, or to, to further exercise that division. They embraced them as brothers, and they said, okay, let's hear what you're saying. And it's within the confines of the way that we're speaking of. We're speaking about people who understand that Yeshua was Hebrew and that he didn't abolish Torah. He didn't denigrate it. In fact, there are instances, I won't go into depth here, but there are instances recorded in the life of Yeshua where he gives clear allegiance to oral Torah, to the Talmud. What Yeshua abolished were those rabbinic ordinances which, when practiced, set aside the Torah of Yahweh by separating ethnic and non-ethnic Hebrews that Yahweh had always intended to make one in Messiah. And there, the parts of the oral Torah that separated the ethnic and the non-ethnic and were at odds with the written Torah that prophesied the unity within the promise of blessing given to Abraham, these were the ones where Yeshua spoke against. But there were other things that were in compliance, that were in alignment with Torah, that he agreed with. And where it was in alignment with Torah, he didn't express any type of disassociation with. So in the same way, when people come, and we're talking about true seekers of truth that are coming and they're wanting to place these things that they had learned out of this other religious playground, to bring it, and set it before us. We need to consider what they're saying, and we need to not try to legalistically impose some doctrine that they have to abide by. We have to appeal to their reason, and we have to first of all, let's find common ground. What is our common ground? Are these words, do we consider these words to be the holders of truth? Okay, well, let's agree that if they're in these words, that we can agree on them. If they're not, let's set that aside and deal with it, later. Let's find common ground in the words that we can see. In other words, let's embrace them and put away this dividing wall of hostility.
Well, the thing that I want to talk about is this. I highlighted this in pink. Was this means we have to die to ourselves at times as we bear with those who not only disagree with us, but even in times antagonistic towards us. What are you saying there exactly?
Just what I said.
But when you say bear with those who, but even times antagonistic, are you talking about just in general? Are you talking about, you're walking this path and Christians are going to go against you? Are you talking about just people that are atheistic, or is that just an all-encompassing blanket statement?
Okay, I made a very definitive statement before I got into there, is that Christians don't have anything to do with the way.
Right.
So we're not.
So what I want you to expound on that a little bit in context of this.
When somebody is seeking truth and they're bringing all kinds of tradition with them, it may be from Islam, it may be from Buddhism. I mean, it may be from all kinds of places, you can tell that they are honestly seeking truth. We have to take a minute. We have to accommodate what they're saying and then show them in Scripture. We got to get them out of all of the.
Yeah, but I thought this was a curious choice of words. Let me drill it down a little bit more. Die to ourselves at times. What exactly do you mean by that?
Just like I'm doing with you now, usually about this point in the conversation, I just tell somebody like you to just go buzz off, but I'm trying to accommodate you and show you that I have already spoken to this particular issue. You're trying to drill down further into it than what
I'm trying to say is, when you use the word die to ourselves, that's just, I think oftentimes it's a very overused generic term that can have a lot of different meaning to a lot of people. And I found it very curious, not that I'm disagreeing with your use of it there, but I thought it was a curious phrase because I think a lot of people would take that differently.
Well, again, when those Pharisees came and sat at that council of Jerusalem, the other elders there, they had to die to themselves. They had to die to what they, frankly, already knew above and beyond what these Pharisees were bringing to the table, to take the time to hear their argument, to not dismiss it, to not minimize it, but just to take it in and seriously consider it against the Torah, what they knew to be the truth in Scripture. And it was when James stood up and spoke the words from Amos, those guys shut up. because they came to the understanding that what was being said here was what was prophesied and was what was taking place in front of their eyes.
Yeah, yeah. And I wanted you to say that because I this is my not that you shouldn't use that phrase there, but I think that phrase is really overused in Christianity. I think it's one of those phrases that you hear all the time that nobody really even knows what it means, and it sounds like, you know, die to ourselves. You're always you know, doing all this stuff that you don't want to do, that you're manufacturing up in your head, whatever it implies to people. And I wanted you to clarify that, because I actually think, and we're talking, I'm in business and marketing, and so words mean things in that context as well. And I've always felt like die to yourself was a very overly dramatic term in a lot of cases in relation to what's really going on. But like you said, you know, they had to stop, they had to reconsider, you know, their position, thinking about others, listening, you know, are they open to truth, or are they just going to do their own thing? Which in essence is what you're saying is another way of saying dying to yourself. So I wanted to clarify that. Good job today. Thank you very much.